I never realized that your mentor was Sir John Gielgud. How much of an influence has he been throughout these years?
Well, when I was a very young actor, I found him rather magical to look at and to listen to. I mean, his voice is not everyone's choice, but it was when I was a young actor. I looked up to him enormously because, of course, since Shakespeare is my, as it were, my governor, if you understand, my favorite, and I would wish I could do some more Shakespeare and would love to, and I hope I do. He was at the time he was a hero of mine. He spanned such a long period from the 20s, 30s, right up, and of course he's still living now. Albeit, you know, he doesn't undertake too much work. He was, I think it was his books that he wrote. He wrote several books which influenced me enormously on his attitude to his work and generally how he thought actors, you know, should comport themselves and behave, etc. And he just became sort of, has remained a hero of mine.
I see. Let me ask you this regarding theater. What's the difference, in your opinion, what's better to do, live theater or just basically recording in the studio?
Well, I think in the end of the day, probably live theater is the most. I started in live theater before I went into television and films. I think live theater is the more satisfying or most satisfying because you get that tremendous feedback from the audience. You get that rapport between audience and actor. One of the things that is very pleasurable for an actor, be he performing in comedy or tragedy or drama, whatever, is how he can hold an audience's attention, and you can feel an audience if they're gripped by what you're trying to do, be it, as I say, comedy or drama. And then, of course, in comedy to get a laugh is lovely because that feeds back to the actor. And as I say, sometimes it's wonderful to be able to, if the actor wants to kill a laugh, because if he thinks you don't want the audience to laugh there, and if you can manage to stop the audience laughing when you want to, I suppose it gives you quite a sense of power. So I think probably having started in the theatre, that would be one's first love. But I love all branches of the profession, really. There's something to be said for each one of them. Television is fascinating, and one learns a lot. Of course, you have to learn. My first television I ever did, I was appalled when I saw it because, of course, I was putting too many faces because I hadn't realized that I wasn't in the theatre. Of course, you have much less on television.
Of course, it's different when you're doing the Rocky Horror Picture Show, or in this case, the Rocky Horror Show.
Or the Rocky Horror Show. Oh, I did that. Yes, I did that on stage. And I learned a lot during that. I never got been involved with anything like that. This was, of course, 1980. And I think as a joke, as I think I may have written in the book, on the last night of our tour, the narrator, which is the part I played, I decided to make my last entrance with his, smart, lovely smoking jacket, etc. But below that, I had fishnet stockings, satin pants, and high-heel shoes, just for fun.
I can imagine quite well what the audience reaction was on that.
Just for a bit of a joke, yeah.
Okay. Speaking of jokes, I know that you had the pleasure of working with Jon Pertwee for all those years, and I know that he was a brilliant, funny man, a magnificent entertainer, and realizing the experiences you've had with him during the show and after with the convention appearances, what is there one thing about Jon Pertwee that people don't know about? Well, I think one of the things that they don't know about, possibly, actually I was talking about it this weekend, because this last weekend we've just had a big Doctor Who convention in Coventry, which is quite near Birmingham, and we had a very successful weekend. But one of the things that not a lot of people know, the people may not know about Jon Pertwee. In my view, he was such a very good leading man to have at the head of a company, because when we started a story, apart from the regular people who we got to know, each new cast that came in with each new story, when we had our first read-through of the script, we'd then go upstairs and have some coffee, and he would make it a point with all
all the guest people who were with us to find out about all of them, what made them tick, what made them... he was interested in all the other people he was working with. He took an interest, which was made everyone feel very much at home. It was a great family atmosphere, always with John. And that's why he was a particularly good leading man. He wanted to find out about other people. And, of course, by finding out about other people, of course, doubtless he learned a lot of things that himself from other people. But he was more than prepared. I mean, he was such a hard worker, of course. He really drove himself hard.
And, of course, speaking of one who drives himself, I know that you've had that sort of drive as well, especially on the stage. Of course, one would say that not only would you have played the character of the Brigadier as sort of national service, but of course everybody considers being in the mousetrap national service as well.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. So, yes, I did that twice, that's right. I think that was, my word, you had to acquire an incredible discipline for that. Because to do a play night after night for a year, you're bound to get to a point, maybe 6 months into the run, or maybe 9 months, or maybe 3 months, whatever. You're bound to get to a point where it becomes very repetitive, and you've got to make sure that it isn't repetitive, because the audience have paid good money to come and see you. So you've got to bring freshness to it every night, even though you're doing the same play, which takes thought and a lot of discipline, you know, not to get too lazy or to amble, well, to walk through it, as they say, because that's very unprofessional to do that, and very rude to the audience, who, as I say, paid good money. So it's quite a discipline, and I 1 year, and then I did for another year between, and that was hard work. That was very, very hard work. I mean, it was very nice for security, because you have a year's work, but it was hard work to try and keep fresh all the time.
Looking into the 80s, when you were had established yourself as an actor on stage, doing some film work, doing some television work, did you ever think that the appreciation for the Brigadier would come back to you in spades in such a way that, beginning when Jonathan Turner asked you to come back and do that story with Davison, and then come back again for the special, and then with Sylvester McCoy, and then fans who grew up watching you on telly, just more or less giving you work in the same way that Ed Wood did for Bela Lugosi back in the 50s. Did you ever think that all this would more or less happen just out of what turned out to be just at least a 5-episode part back in the 60s?
Well, I know. No, I didn't at all. That's what's so extraordinary. I mean, when I did my first Doctor Who was as Brett Vyam in the Dalek Master Plan, the first one, I thought it was, to me, another job and an engagement, you know, for 4 episodes, and I thought, well, okay, that was fun, and then I got on with what I got on with. And because of the director, Douglas Camfield, I think he is more responsible. Of course, I suppose I'm responsible as well, but he more than anyone else has been responsible for my longevity in this part, because he directed me in that one, then he directed me in The Web of Fear as the Colonel Lethbridge-Stewart, which then led on to the Brigadier, and he directed me in the first Brigadier story with Patrick Troughton. And then, of course, later with John Pertwee, he directed me again and again. He directed the radio, and of course he directed me with Tom Baker as well, in Turn of the Zygon. So I think Douglas Camfield was very, he took the view that he was in the army, he was an army man himself. He was a second lieutenant, I think. I was, as you know from the book, only a private. I didn't have any ambition to be a serious soldier. But, so that's why I called myself a celluloid soldier sometimes, maybe. But I think more responsible than anyone else. And he saw in my performance, I suppose, in The Web of Fear, he thought I was natural for an officer material, and I explained to him that I'd only been a private in the army, and indeed hadn't been taught how to fire a gun. They'd forgotten. And but he said I came over naturally as an officer type. Well, I suppose the thing was, because my father was indeed a real army officer in the First World War before becoming a diplomat. It must have rubbed off from my observation of my father, and indeed observation of the officers under whom I served in my national service period.